Hello, everybody, and welcome to a festive episode of The Industry, an Esports Insider podcast where I speak to stakeholders about the esports sector. In this episode, we're going to be talking about how the esports sector has embraced the anime industry. In particular, we'll be touching on what are some of the trends that are occurring in both of those sectors, and also why it's important to tap into new audiences. For this episode, I'm joined by Kerry Waananen, a creative comms specialist who has worked with Unlocked, Paper Crowns, and yes, even Esports Insider, as the first host of this very podcast, The Industry. It's a great chat, and I can't wait for you to hear it. So let's go. Before we jump into this episode, the Industry podcast is sponsored by Integrated Systems Europe, the world-renowned annual tech show taking place in Barcelona. Are you ready to challenge your senses with one big, virtually impossible experience? At the event, you'll be able to hold the future of tech today and feel the possibility of tomorrow. It's time to be inspired, reconnect with each other, and drive things forward. It's time to switch it back on at ISE 2025. Integrated Systems Europe will take place on February 4th to the 7th, 2025 at Fira de Barcelona. If you register today, you can save €215. So make sure to visit iseurope.org and use the code Esports Insider for your free registration. ISE 2025, connection restored. Now, let's get on to the episode. So, Kerry, it's great to have you on the podcast. How does it feel first, before we jump into anime and esports and your expertise within that? How does it feel to be on the opposite side? Because for long-time listeners of the industry, you were the original host of the industry.
Yeah, that's right. Feels like walking into an old house I used to know, I guess. I'm really happy to be invited on, Tom, and looking forward to chatting with you about this, since you and I both behind the scenes always shared commentary about anime's involvement in esports and gaming. So it'll be a nice chat today.
Yeah, it's a nice little Christmas gift, not just for the listeners, right, but for us as well, because we finally get to talk about something that, yeah, I think, like I said, behind the scenes we've talked about for, a long time. I guess, like, for those then who are a bit still unaware, because obviously we live in an esports bubble, but then there is also like a cultural bubble on top of that, and loads of other bubbles, right? For those then who are unaware of like how much this convergence between anime and esports is happening, like, is it as big as a phenomenon as what we're seeing, or is it like a bit of a bubble kind of sector?
Well, especially this year, I've just been seeing anime bleeding more and more outside of its bubble, to use your phrase, that it has become more and more mainstream because it's become more and more available through the Netflix investing heavily in anime programming, and Netflix is sort of unanimous with online streaming in almost every country. There's a sort of Netflix around. Prime as well, investing into it. Crunchyroll, purchased by Sony, and really going very, very hard in promoting it. And I feel like Crunchyroll champions a lot of very mainstream, and I mean a lot of very Japanese, very sort of niche titles, but really pushing like My Hero Academia, Dandadan, Solo Leveling, of course Naruto, they and One Piece, of course, and Netflix has the live action One Piece. So if you are interested in anime and you've been exposed to anime, if you've been online, you've been exposed to anime 100%. You've seen an anime avatar, you've seen an anime meme, you've seen anime aesthetics used in YouTube videos, in like lo-fi playlists, et cetera, et cetera. So if you're keen to like learn more about anime or like watch it, you're going to have one of these services, either Netflix or Amazon Prime or something like that. And then if you want to go really, really deep or watch the big popular ones that everybody's talking about, you're going to have a Crunchyroll account. So I think outside of anime's sort of overlap in esports, I talked with Alexander Lee from Digiday about sports also really embracing anime too. We saw it really big during the Tokyo Olympics during the pandemic, and then it made a reprisal in the Paris Olympics too, of just athletes talking about anime, athletes using anime poses in their celebrations, athletes sort of really embracing their love of anime on screen for the masses to not only consume, but also media to then create content from. There was so many articles about the I think it was a long distance runner or sprinter, Noah.
Oh, Noah Lyles, from the
Noah
US
Lyles.
team.
Yeah, he was covered all over mainstream media for his Yu-Gi-Oh card, sort of like not necessarily a walk-up, but a walk-up. And so it expanded a lot, and there was all sorts of listicles of all anime references in the Paris Olympics and all these sort of things. So esports was ahead of the curve, I would say, but to sort of maybe get ahead of your line of questioning, I see like athletes and competition and overcoming and training and focus and drama. There's a huge overlap between traditional esports athletes or traditional sports athletes and esports athletes in finding inspiration in watching these animes and having it push them forwards, or using it as inspiration, or considering themselves as a main character in an anime and pushing themselves, asking themselves what would Goku do, etc. And I mean, the storylines in anime, they're super dramatic, they're super thematic, there's all these arcs, there's ups and downs and big epic battles. So it ties itself really into sports and esports, I think.
I think what's really fascinating as well is the kind of the rise in mainstream popularity between esports and sports. They've kind of, in a way, gone through this cultural phenomenon together with the rise of the internet, with the rise of kind of modern day culture as we see it now, right? And so even though it's only recently that we've, or at least in the last couple of years, that we've seen esports and anime like fully collaborate together, that audience has always felt the same in a way from a marketability standpoint, right?
Yeah, 100%. I mean, I would say that esports and the anime crowd are nearly one-to-one in terms of, if you're into esports, you probably are also into anime, and vice versa. And I've seen data and reports like Kotaku, or was it Polygon? One of those two put out a like the quote unquote largest anime study ever, predominantly focused on North America. But at the beginning of the year, looking at like what the anime audience and how many people are interested in anime and what those people look like and such. And this study and other studies found that basically anime audiences over-index for gaming, and the other way around, that gaming audiences will over-index for being interested in anime as well. So I think it really speaks to just the thematic elements of playing a video game has like scratches a similar itch to watching an anime with cinematics, with story, with strife and conflict, and doing incredible things, having these incredible abilities, and being able to like feel very powerful by either putting yourself in the main character in a video game or within an anime. And then when it comes to esports, right? Like esports, I still consider as marketing, and anime also being used as marketing, as I've affectionately referred to it in my newsletter, as animarketing. It is just super compelling, right? Because there's built-in suspension of disbelief that whatever you're seeing, you're already taking it sort of out of the context, or assigning the context from what you identify. So if you see a video game character next to something in marketing, your brain is already there. The same goes with anime. Your brain is already there. And so you already have this like really strong identification with the story and everything going behind that. And even if you've never seen this anime, just seeing something that looks like an anime character or a video game character already sort of installs a level, like a suspension of disbelief, that I think is very powerful when it comes to marketing. Because then whatever you're seeing, it doesn't matter if it makes sense or whatever, if it follows the vibe, then it can really hit, and it can do something different than sports marketing or other types of traditional media marketing can and cannot do.
I guess like the main thing when you talk about kind of like having that that face essentially, and like you said, anime, like I know obviously Pokemon with Ash Ketchum, but Goku, like Eren Yeager for Attack on Titan, right? These are recognizable names for anime communities. You even see that in a little bit of marketing when you see how esports organizations sometimes market their players. I mean, I think the biggest example, given that I know more about League of Legends, is you look at Faker, for example. His nickname is the Unkillable Demon King, right? That's as anime as you can get, really, in terms of a title, right?
Yeah, Faker is anime. He's super anime for sure, and League of Legends too. And you look at how League of Legends, their anime or animated music videos. It's not necessarily anime per se, but very anime coded. Definitely taking on the aesthetics of Japanese animation, but also Japanese sort of video game, I don't know, gameplay or aesthetics there as well, right? The movements, the poses, the battles, all these things. So it's an aesthetic, and it is built into a lot of things, a lot of marketing and like engagement seeking activities that's is hard to resist.
I think as well, like one thing that I can remember that stood out to me is I was speaking to Team Liquid for the Wave of One campaign, which was this mega kind of collaborative campaign trying to bring all of their rosters together. And they used and have said that they used anime and the anime style to bring that together. It's kind of like an isekai, which is basically being transported into another world to bring all of their rosters and bring them as one, right? So using something like that, and actually esports organizations even being aware of, we need to kind of target this market because it's the most relatable market, is smart in itself. And I think as well, like the other thing that we've seen, and this is probably where most people see anime and esports collaborations happen, right, is merch, right? It's a big merchandise sales point for a lot of esports organizations. I mean, Furia Team BDS this year did My Hero Academia merch. Team Liquid did Death Note merch. 2023 TSM did Full Metal Alchemist Brotherhood merch, an anime that's not even been released for about 15 years, I believe, right?
Yeah, same with Death Note and Team Liquid. I thought that was a curious one. I was here for it. I love both Team Liquid and Death Note, but curious collaboration there. I thought, same with, as you mentioned, the TSM and Full Metal Alchemist Brotherhood, right? And like a lot of these other ones that you mentioned, My Hero Academia is still going. A lot of Attack on Titan with famously 100 Thieves and the High Ground collaboration as well. And Attack on Titan has also been pretty furious in the pace of its licensing, right? It had collaborations, I think, maybe in Fortnite, definitely in plenty of other mobile titles as well. My Hero Academia also had partnered with Overwatch 2 with some skins there. And so I think, well, let's start off with merchandise. So I think Team Liquid has been prolific in it, in that they sort of started with Naruto, and then Naruto, the second one, Shippuden.
Yes, yeah.
And then there was definitely 100 Thieves, and 100 Thieves, I think, took it up to 11, because then they were doing quite a lot of pure just crossover licensing. So they had Pokemon, they also had Naruto too. I don't remember off the top of my head, but
I'm pretty sure Naruto has used been quite a few, right? And I'm pretty sure Dragon Ball has been using a couple of things.
I think they also had My Hero Academia. I think maybe also Hunter x Hunter was in there somewhere too. So I think that was an appeal to the streetwear vibe that a lot of esports merchandise has, and this limited edition, hey, we're gonna sign this agreement, we're gonna just do one run, we're gonna use your IP in a way and speak directly to a very similar audience who's very interested in this, and not necessarily mass produce this and put this in Walmart's or Target or whatever. This is very specific, speaking to a core group, and we're gonna do it this way, and it's going to elevate both of our brands and IPs in a way, because we're Team Liquid, we're 100 Thieves, we're TSM, and we have this built-in, very dedicated fan base that they maybe don't buy every drop, but they're looking forward to the next one. And so we want to give back to the fans, and we want to engage with IP that we know that they'll really like. So I think that makes sense. It's really cool. They also usually make really cool sort of drop videos out of this, where they can lean into being very creative with the IP and everything. And then to the second point of just sort of bringing attention again to these different areas. So you mentioned Furia. I'm pretty sure that Furia collaborated with Crunchyroll even to help promote the basically the service in Brazil, right? So Furia, one of the most watched and engaged organizations in Brazil, they basically get tapped to help market this new anime service to a directly engaged and super relevant audience for them. I think that makes a lot of sense, and that's what a lot of orgs do also in general for publishers with their games, right? They're competing in these games, they are spreading awareness for these games. So esports organizations are pretty powerful marketing avenues themselves, but it is based in ways that are similar to sports, that sports teams have their built-in fandom. But what we haven't seen, as far as I can tell, is an official merchandising partnership with sports organizations like we have seen it with esports organizations. I'm sure the licensing fees have something to do with that. I'm sure that there's more hurdles to jump through, and esports is famously very light and agile and can get a lot of things done in a short amount of time. So that probably is there, but also like sports has an older audience, has broader interests. Like esports is super dialed in. Their audience is basically 100% digital, and being able to target and really understand your audience is, I think, easier to convince these anime companies to license the IP and prove that, hey, this was a success.
Yeah, and I think as well, talking about when you mentioned Crunchyroll, actually, I remember that I believe it was Evo that also partnered with Crunchyroll, which was obviously a big one. Like, obviously, Evo, one of the biggest fighting game tournaments. I'll go on to a little bit about the fighting game and esports crossover in itself, because that's a whole different kind of genre in itself, really. But yeah, we've talking about sports. I agree. I still think that there is that. What we're actually seeing with marketing between esports and anime is the basis of what we're going to see with anime marketing in other sectors. And it looks like esports is being used as that tester, and it's the perfect testing ground, like you said, with the audience being as core as what it is, and how relatable each audience is. And I think as football generations start to get older, and and when football generations in terms of like the anime fans start to get older and still have football, I think a lot of crossover from that will actually appear. I think talking about though how far this crossover can go, right? I guess even though it's not technically esports, probably the pinnacle of where you would see esports and anime combine is through Arcane, right? Now, League of Legends is not necessarily by its merit an esport game, but it's very much marketed as an esports game to a lot of the community. It's very competitive focused. And so having a developer like Riot Games create there is obviously debates over, is it an anime, is it not, because obviously the creation of it, right? But a lot of people would consider it still at least anime style. Does, I think, show the power in which it has, and also the power in which it's given the popularity of League of Legends after that, which then obviously it's this funnel system. People watch Arcane, people play League of Legends, people get invested in the game, and then see that there's a competitive scene. People watch the competitive scene, or people be competitive, right? That it's a massive funnel system that works through that marketing gain. And so, yeah, do you think that that's like the furthest that crossovers can go, is creating these kind of anime styles? We've seen it with Dota as well. I don't want to just shout out League of Legends, but Dota's another one that's done a very similar style of campaign.
Yeah, I mean, I've been writing recently about just games and anime and the like transmedia crossover between them both, because I sort of see what's been happening now is a lot of games as they're gaining popularity, or perhaps to maintain popularity after they've been out for a few years, is that they will then expand into a anime series or anime movie, because that is a more direct line, I think, in terms of suspension of disbelief and aesthetics and understanding, than the like heights of risk that you're taking doing a live action adaptation. So taking, for instance, like League of Legends, and then they spend a lot of money on Arcane, but Arcane is also incredible, right? And it will stand the test of time. It will be in people's hearts and minds for a very long time. And they had a pretty interesting, just to focus on League of Legends and Arcane for a moment, they had a lot of interesting synergy, because Arcane season 2 debuted just days after Worlds. In the first few episodes, they integrated the World's anthem into the Arcane season, and you've seen also a few. I'm on the last episode right now, so I haven't finished that one, but I've noticed a few of the songs from the opening ceremony of Worlds also weaving themselves into Arcane as well. So they've done a pretty masterful job maximizing that sort of recognition and integrating these sort of touch points. I mean, Riot is also, right, they invested into their virtual bands, they have their virtual influencer, they have invested in music for all their titles, and really done really interesting stuff. And also with the cinematics of Valorant and the cinematics with League of Legends and the different campaigns and all these things. So Riot's a pretty interesting company in this regard. And as you mentioned, Dota has its anime adaptation. Overwatch allegedly was working on an animated thing through Blizzard, but that was supposed to happen with Netflix. That was revealed in Jason Schreier's book focusing on Blizzard Play Nice recently, but that is locked in lawsuit Hades at the moment. But I think that's, like, there is such a strong crossover with game IP can very easily elevate itself into a transmedia IP, because game storytelling and like the engagement and the emotion that people feel for it can be expanded if thought not to, hey, let's just retell the game story one-to-one as we can into another format, but let's expand the story or tell untold stories where, like, look around this corner that you could never look around in the game. Like, for instance, in The Last of Us, how they've had a few episodes that explore things that they didn't touch on at all in the game, right? That's interesting. I think that makes a lot of sense for expanding the universe in that way. And like Tomb Raider is getting an anime adaptation. It's not a game, but like Lord of the Rings is getting an anime adaptation. Like there's so much crossover. Also, I mean, not even just to mention like manga and comic book adaptations and all these things. So I think game IP is sort of now the big resource for a lot of media to look at. Okay, how can we tap into this and this super engaged audience that they're going to check it out, right? If there's an anime adaptation, if there's a live action movie, if there's something like this, a certain portion of this audience, this fan base is going to check out whatever we do. So let's do a really good job, and then we have this feedback loop, as we saw with all of the big hits. When like the transmedia, the adaptation comes out, the player base grows again. So it is a sort of, in a way, can be looked at as also pure marketing of, hey, we want to keep our player base going, increasing, or we want to stoke this up, we want to bring people back, rediscover this or whatever. Let's look at doing this, or let's build this into our roadmap as a sort of recontact thing, because people are going to have a Netflix account. People are going to have these things. Also, it makes sense for Netflix or any of these other streamers to think about, okay, what do we have? What's on our roadmap? How can we get new subs or resubs? How can we have these sort of things that are interested? Netflix, as we know, is also trying to figure out what they're doing in gaming. So having these sort of crossovers in this way makes a lot of sense.
I think the point that you mentioned about the timing of Arcane when it concluded, basically being so close to the World Championship, makes so much. It has to be intentional, right? I believe that it's way not it. It just has to be intentional in the fact that when you actually have like an esports audience, they're the most passionate audience of a game, right? Mm-hmm. They're the ones that mainly will talk about the game as much. They will normally interact with people about the game because they're not just invested in the game, they're invested in watching people competitively play the game. So having that surge of new fans coming through Arcane, which is what happened, and then having this major esports tournament basically take place a few weeks afterwards, or at least in the midst of it, right, is such a smart thing in terms of like, oh, look, there's this booming community because look at all these people talking about this competitive thing. Who's, Faker, who's all of these other players that are being talked about. It definitely is a good way of showing how you can try and keep those fans, right? Because I guess this moves on to the next point, right, is you can market yourself with anime merchandise and do anime marketing and to try and attract those anime fans. And this just doesn't just apply to anime fans. This applies to fans of sports if you want to target a sports audience, or K-pop if you want to target a K-pop audience, or any musical genre. You've got to then keep them, right? And you've got to make sure that yes, this is what's brought you in, but look at actually what esports is still. You want to still be true to actually what you are offering, so that then the audience and the potential fan actually becomes a fan of that and not just a fan of your merchandise collaboration or your anime that you do, right?
Right. Yeah. And I mean, we've also seen like bigger brands also investing in anime for the same idea, just as brands were looking at gaming for the first time maybe 5 years ago, right? They're getting their market research and they're seeing that the audience that they're trying to reach and where they want to be spending their marketing dollars reaching is interested in gaming, and they're interested in anime. So I think 5-10 years ago, brands were like, okay, we need to do something in gaming. What do we do with gaming? And they looked at esports, and they attached themselves to esports in a lot of ways, either with orgs, for content, for sponsorship, for in-game activations, however they could do it, right? And I think now with just the incredible creativity that's unlocked and how sort of many third-party developers there are involved, like brands, it's never been easier for brands to be inside of a game in Roblox or Fortnite or Minecraft or whatever. Minecraft, I think, a much less nowadays, but still, like, you can get your brand in a game now, but then it's now sort of dime a dozen, and it's so dependent on how good the game experience is, which maybe not a lot of brands care that much about. They just want to be in a game because that's what makes sense to them. But what players want, obviously, is they want to play fun games. So same goes for an anime audience. Anime audiences want to watch good anime. So doing something involving anime, I think you also have to know the medium in a way and have trusted partners that can deliver stuff. I was reading recently, so many anime studios in Japan, like the traditional ones, they're booked out for years already. Like they are full. They cannot make the stuff fast enough. So, and because of how anime has been treated a bit like champagne, I would say that there's very traditional thought of like anime is anime made in Japan, but there is such a hunger for it and brands wanting to be involved that it's going to, I think, have to evolve into involving some kavas and some proseccos, that there is an audience for it and it's at a different price point, but people also want it. So I think we'll probably see an expansion of that. And like recently, I think it was Team Falcons also partnered with manga publications, right?
Yeah, and that's across, like, I believe manga, anime, I think films as well, right? Yeah. It's a big because I think manga publications also got bought by, I believe it was either Savvy Games Group or the Public Investment Fund, or within that tie-in and whatnot. Yeah, so that's another big one that they're looking at. Obviously, Saudi Arabia is looking at investing in a whole host of sectors, esports being one, but anime is another as well, right?
Yeah, and Sony was also looking at acquiring the media rights owner that owns quite a lot of anime, but also that owns From Software
Mm-hmm.
and stuff. So, like, I think there's going to be quite a lot of acquisitions and expansion of anime content outside of Japan. And so I'm sort of veering away from your question here, but I think that the hunger for anime is there. Brands want to do something because they see that people are interested in, how do I do this? How can I get my brand into an anime that's not going to be released for a few years? Does that make sense? Do I need to make an anime focused campaign like McDonald's did, or Kia, or all these other ones? Like, I think that there's quite a lot of room there, and I think esports orgs, having worked with anime for quite a long time, and also creating content that is adjacent and sort of scratches the same itch, are pretty well positioned to do something that is adjacent, right? Like, esports is not just video games and sports, right? It is also its own aesthetic. It is its own sort of category of highly engaged online fandom
Mm-hmm.
that is ripe with memes and like a bit counterculture, and it is pretty well aligned, I think, with an anime audience in general.
So with esports as a marketing tool as a whole, as we kind of like wind down on the whole conversation, I think it's important that this isn't just about anime. And while obviously a lot of our talk was actually on anime, it is actually a lot about the new generation, right? And new fandom and modern culture. Esports is obviously a part of that. It's one of the smaller compared to like the likes of anime, but it still has grown up with that. But it's also about developing fandom. It's that weird crossover where esports is about trying to be traditional sports in terms of developing long-term fandom, but a marketing agency to actually appeal to new audiences and to market their brand in itself, right? So esports uses the likes of K-pop, it uses the likes of rap, it uses the likes of streetwear, which has been very common, and anime as well, right? What do you think that esports in a way is kind of like the best like testing pool then for what marketers can kind of use in other sectors, because esports is something that is trying to connect to that younger audience? And do you think a lot of actually big brands are looking at what esports is doing and thinking maybe in the next 3-4 years that is something that maybe we actually go to when our audiences kind of grow up a little bit more and develop these tastes?
I mean, it's a tough one. I think in terms of viewership, that makes a lot of sense because esports viewership has been really consistent, and especially this year, like I think I'm pretty confident in saying that it has overall across all esports that viewership is high. I think it's higher than it was last year and has grown. So I feel confident in that. Whereas in overall influencer streaming, whether it's just chatting or playing games or whatever, that is so hit focused and flavor of the month and really chasing what the new game is out, what everybody else is playing. And so it's really fickle in that sense. So I think esports, it requires a bit of patience and consistency because esports can't really bend itself to every whim of what's trending right now. Of course, like the content that you make is one thing, right? Like just using an example, like G2 is really good at being very adaptive and creating content that's relevant to sort of what's popular right now and what's going to do numbers. But esports is not going to veer all over the map to try to chase that this is what we're doing, right? It will remain consistent in the tournaments that they do, the games that are there. Of course, a new esport could pop up next year and it will bring with it a different sort of broadcasting and different way of engaging with audiences. But I think as a whole, brands looking to test things that appeal to a modern audience with flexibility, I think esports does make a lot of sense because influencers, right? Like influencers are also, they're super powerful because the social media websites and creator platforms prefer personal accounts rather than brand accounts, right? So they can just go farther. They can do a lot more without paid spend. Whereas if you're a business on social media or creator platforms, you have to spend to hit the numbers. That's just how they're going to get you. But with influencers too, right? They can get burnt out. They can have a controversy. There's all these things that are sort of involved that is high risk, high reward, but they're super susceptible to the algorithm. They're super susceptible to how they're going to pop off or how they make their content and whether they can be consistent with this and all these things. So I think esports is a bit of a min-max in that you have consistency and you're able to appeal to young audiences. That is also esports is experimenting, as you mentioned, with K-pop, with rap, with things that are popular with younger generations, and it's very natural that it's doing that. It's not forcing it or anything. It just is pretty consistent there, while it also is not going to try something new and completely change direction. So it has consistency with also flexibility and speaking youth culture, having young people involved in the brands, in the orgs, and having a pretty focused demographic of audience.
Do you think that then, like, to kind of clarify a little bit more what I was saying, like industries such as like sports, for example, then are kind of looking at how esports is marketing itself to younger people and younger generations?
The most insane thing is happening next week, in my opinion, which is, I don't know if you've been paying attention to NFL at all, but they've been doing these alt casts. So they've invented, I think Disney has invented some insane technology to be able to broadcast a live NFL game, but then reskin what you're seeing with
seen this,
IP.
yes.
So like, I think they did
was there a SpongeBob one?
Yeah, that was
the Super Bowl.
Yeah, Super Bowl. I think this past year on Nickelodeon or something. So in on Christmas, they're doing the same thing with The Simpsons. So, and when I look at this, what I see is like NFL Blitz, right? Like it looks like you're watching a video game. It looks like you're watching Avatar. So I think they are very much trying to be more digital and more appealing, more video game like. So they are doing really insane technological solutions to make the physical sport more digital and more appealing. Whereas esports doesn't really need that at all, because it just suffers the problem that it's not very engaging to watch somebody sat behind a computer executing these really insane moves right on screen. So it goes the other way. I think in a way, I'm pretty surprised actually that esports hasn't experimented more with like VTube avatars for their the face cams to make it more engaging to watch the players, to have a bit more personality while they're super focused and aren't, being that engaging. And same with casters, right? That was something I'm surprised that Riot never got across the line of having their desk staff and talent do something with, or experiment at least with VTube avatars.
Yeah, I think it's super fascinating talking about kind of how marketing for esports can kind of cross over, and like I said, even though we did focus mainly on anime, there are so many other ways in which marketing and modern marketing has been used in esports, and how it is starting to bleed over into other sectors. Kerry, honestly, this has been a long time coming to chat about this. I guess the final thing for me then is with regards to going back to the topic of at large with anime and esports, and particularly esports teams. Do you see then this kind of collaboration to continue going into 2025 and beyond?
I certainly can see it. I think it sort of relies on how esports orgs want to position themselves. I mean, I think that there was a bit of an oversaturation of merchandise collaborations, and were you going to buy this merchandise from TSM versus this one from 100 Thieves versus this one from Team Liquid? So I anticipate that will maybe cool a bit, or potentially look at a way of combining those. So it's maybe a big IP with multiple collections and you can choose that way. Not sure about that one. I just generally feel that merchandise collaborations will maybe cool a bit. And I think that we could see the likes of an anime or an anime streaming service or something have more of an overlap with esports in some regard, either with a tournament organizer, either with a sort of launch video or trailer at a tournament or something along those lines, or potentially even seeing an anime retelling of esports history, right? Mm-hmm. Could you imagine the history of Faker told in a 3-part anime series, or the history of Counter-Strike, like something along those lines? Like that could be very interesting and would be a perfect fit.
Yeah, perfect. Kerry, thank you so much for coming on and taking the time with me. And is there anything that you want to shout out before we sign off?
Subscribe to my newsletter, Hybrid Theory, on Beehive. So hybridtheory.beehiiv.com.
Yeah, would definitely recommend it. Thank you so much, Kerry, and have a good 2025 as well.
Thanks. You too, Tom. Thanks so much.